Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast, where the art and science of operational excellence come to life through captivating stories of triumph, challenge, and transformation from the front lines of industry. Our distinguished guests, from manufacturing pioneers and medical device innovators to aerospace visionaries, diagnostic lab leaders, and major capital project leaders, unveil the hidden patterns and powerful insights that drive exceptional results in the complex world of operations. Join us on this journey of discovery as we explore the brilliant minds behind the systems that make our world work and uncover the leadership secrets that could revolutionize your approach to operations forever. Here is your host, Ed Pound.
Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast. Our guest today is a powerhouse in the world of shipbuilding and ship repair, with a career dedicated to transforming an industry that is critical to national security, but faces some of its toughest operational challenges in decades. She's the founder and principal of Heppenstall Group, where she's been a driving force behind the development of innovative process improvement strategies for the maritime sector. Working with naval and commercial shipyards, she has brought clarity, structure, and measurable improvement to one of the most complex manufacturing environments in the world. She co-developed the Lean Shipbuilding model for the industry. At a time when the United States holds less than 1% of the world's commercial shipbuilding market, her work is an important element in the push to revitalize American capabilities and reestablish maritime leadership. She's also a member of the Operations Science Institute, the Board of Advisors, and a contributing author with a chapter on shipbuilding and ship repair in the new book, Operations Science Applied, which should be out in the fourth quarter. Please join me in welcoming to the Operations Science Podcast, Lisa Elles. Hey, Lisa, how are you?
Hi, Ed. I am doing great. And thank you for such a warm welcome. I'm so time to do this.
Well earned. I'm looking forward to today's conversation. I mean, shipbuilding is such an interesting topic. You know, it's basically ancient and kind of interesting where things have gone with the U.S. shipbuilding industry. But let's jump right into it. You said one of the biggest challenges in shipbuilding is the industry's tendency to solve problems by replacing people instead of improving processes. Can you share an example where focusing on process over people made a measurable impact?
Absolutely. I have plenty of examples. But first, let me explain. I'm sharing from the perspective I've worked with many U.S. shipyards over the last 30 years to improve performance, but I'm certainly not speaking on behalf of any shipyard or about every shipyard in the country. So it's a collection of my observations, right? And understanding from trying to improve shipyards for many years. But I do want to kind of ground for those of the viewers that may not really be familiar with the industry. I have to say it's full of some of the brightest, most capable, hardest working people that I've, in the country, from at every level, from naval architects and engineers, from the painters and the welders. What they come together as an organization to accomplish and to produce is truly remarkable. And this industry, we always say it's very complex. And many, I kind of smile at that because all companies say that, but
I will tell you one thing that every company I've ever talked to says is we're different.
Exactly. Shipbuilding has a lot of similarities to large civil construction. And I know, Ed, that's certainly a big area of your expertise. But just kind of just take a second to think about, we have to design and build a large, complex structure, right? That has to function while moving. And moving through water or sometimes underwater. And it requires not just 3,000 parts like a car, like an automobile, or 103,000 parts like the Boeing 777, but hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of parts and
Fascinating. Yeah.
while meeting the laws of physics and hydrodynamics. So, you can just think about and appreciate the level of constraints and transactions and the handoffs that have to occur and the communication required and and a large number of organizations that are involved. So it's not just for the faint of heart.
Oh, it's not.
One of I think my favorite example And it's not example that I was involved in because it happened before I was born, but it's the building of the Liberty ships. You being a history buff, you probably know this story, really well. But Kaiser shipyards had several shipyards on the West Coast, and they were in the 1930s. They were building cargo ships for the Maritime Commission, and they were known for developing new methods, and they were outproducing the competition, the other East Coast shipyards. That they're 25% faster, two-thirds faster, and 25% cheaper. And then along came World War II. And to support the war, these same yards started building Liberty ships and Victory ships. I think is another. It wasn't as it was a smaller platform, but as you know, that many of the workforce, the workers, the men were off fighting the war. So they had to build these ships with an inexperienced workforce full of women. So they could no longer rely on that experience and intuition and judgment of production, and that they had to design in a process that was mistake proof. So they standardized the ship. They broke the build strategy into smaller chunks of work. They prefabricated sections and used jigs and fixtures to ensure the accuracy, and they standardized their process and provided very simple instructions. The bottom line, Kaiser yards delivered 750 of the 2,700 Liberty ships built. The first ship. I don't know if you know this, but took 245 days to build. And if you compare that to today's, for a similar size ship, and it was pretty low complexity, I would say, in terms of the type of ship, but today it would take 3 to 6 months. Probably the first one about 6 months. So so, and for the Liberty ships, it took a little over 8 months. The 20th ship took about 2 months to build. But when you look over, the full fleet of 2,700 Liberty ships, they were being delivered every 1.5 days.
Wow. Wow. That's impressive.
It is, and it's one of my favorite stories because when I'm when I'm working with the shipyards, I like to, if I'm sharing this story, I like to add that, if you really want to significantly improve your throughput, just fill the shipyard with a lot of women.
There you go. Well, finally, we've discovered the secret. I love that story. That's great. Let's just step back. That was a great start because a lot of people might not be familiar with the history of shipbuilding in the United States. And as you pointed out, at one time we were building most of the ships in the world, at least a very large portion of it. And that's not the case these days. Would you just take a little tour through the history of shipbuilding in the United States?
I would say that the last time that U.S. was the actual world leader in commercial shipbuilding was in the 1800s when ships were made of. So it goes back that far. Certainly, and that's in peacetime. In wartime, just looking back in the 30s and 40s, certainly the number of ships and that we were building for a very specific reason. Those Many of those ships, by the way, were sold to foreign investors later, or ship owners
After the war.
after the war.
Yeah, World War II we're talking about. Yes.
Exactly. And I mean, shipbuilding's been around a long time, but currently, in terms of gross tonnage, China, Korea, and Japan, they build 90% today, 90% of the world's tonnage. So when you're talking about US is actually building 0.2% of 1%, and about 5% in the 1970s. So our shipyards have dwindled from, let's see, I don't know, in the early 2000s, we had about 700 shipyards in the country. This is a couple years old data point, but currently we have about 300 shipyards. So we've lost 50% of our shipbuilding, and ship repair capacity. And you know how important having a viable shipbuilding industrial base, it's critical to maintaining a strong national defense. So there's need to build ships in times of unrest. You need to have a strong infrastructure in place.
So, Lisa, what's the difference, and distinguish for the audience just the difference between the characteristics of commercial shipbuilding in the United States and shipbuilding for the Navy, for the government?
Well, for Navy shipbuilding or government shipbuilding, for national security purposes, they need to be built, in the country that they're.
Makes sense.
And in commercial shipbuilding, it's a lot more competitive. As a ship owner, you can, choose to go anywhere in the world for the most part. I mean, there's certain regulations that dictate where you have to where you can go. But anyway, so it's just a lot more competitive. You're competing with the countries that have much different labor rate, and you're competing with countries or with shipyards that get heavily subsidized by their government. And we haven't really, the U.S. doesn't operate that way. Unfortunately, under the current administration, President Trump's made it a national priority to strengthen the U.S. maritime industrial base. And I really think his administration understands that having a viable shipbuilding industrial base is critical to maintaining that strong national defense. We'll see how that goes.
So that's kind of the dynamics, the history of the industry. You developed or co-developed the Lean Shipbuilding model. What are its key principles, and how has it been applied in shipbuilding, ship repair in the U.S.?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite subjects. Back in 2002 to, I don't know, the 2007 timeframe, I had really the privilege of leading a lean shipbuilding and ship repair project through the National Shipbuilding Research Program, involving three commercial ship building yards and three Navy ship repair yards, along with a couple of experts. Michael Boyer with V2R Consulting Group out of Seattle. He was one of my mentors and very close friend to this day. And Dr. Jeff Leiker, professor from University of Michigan, and many people know him as the author of The Toyota Way. So we had some heavy hitters helping us. We learned that lean principles universally, apply. They prove time and time again to significantly improve performance. We also learned that we couldn't just take the Toyota Way, kind of the cookbook, and apply it to our world that has so much variability. So we certainly did our fair share of value stream mapping to really dig in and understand how value is created from raw materials, to actually through the maintenance and sustainment of a ship. But we standardize as much everywhere we could, wherever it made sense. But we standardize the design and the process. We developed design for producibility standards. We met with the production guys and documented and formalized their preferences. It's like if they had their say in it, this is how they would. This is how they want to build the ship. It's much easier this way. They standardize we standardize the design for maintenance so that we could make sure we had enough maintenance envelope around the pieces of equipment. Standardize even the look of the design, and begin using plug and play design modules or design standards. Very typical. We implemented a robust 5S, workplace organization. Yeah, yeah, and for shipbuilding, because repair was a little different, but where we really impact throughput was when we set up the primary and secondary model lines and really implemented pull, pacing, and sequencing, and balanced the line to meet demand.
When you say clarification, when you say primary and secondary model lines, explain a little bit more about what that means in terms of building a ship.
Shipbuilding used to be, we would call it stick building. It's just you have all these millions of parts and pieces, and you just have a lot of people, and I mean it's a lot more. It's a lot more. There's a process, more than what I'm explaining. But modern day, we build in modules, so it's basically you take this, it starts in small chunks of steel and or aluminum, and you just build bigger, you know, you build panels, and panels then become, a module or assembly and a unit, and then you start stacking. You lift. Right. So, and we depended on a schedule, a very detailed schedule, that would say, On this day, you have to perform this task," and the one thing that was consistent on every shipbuilding program is, having spent all this time building that giant schedule, we knew on day one that schedule, it was no longer accurate.
That is guaranteed with deterministic schedules. Yep.
We really started just looking at the parts and pieces in a more kind of in a different way, and really understanding. So if you've got 6,000 spools of pipe, for the whole ship, and we knew this because we 3D model it, and you push a button and you know how many parts and pieces go where, right? Because of the great design effort that they do. But so we started, we broke the build strategy and the outfitting strategy, to where we knew what goes where when, in what order, and we just count. So if we had 6,000 pieces of pipe, then and we have 60 days to do that in, then whatever the math is, you have to install so many pieces of pipe a day, right? And so we started developing tack time, and then we would pull to the next workstation, and we'd set up buffers, that were where it was smart, so that we wouldn't starve out. So the feeder line, was the primary line. It's just like a manufacturing line, and then we'd have feeder lines going into where they came to the point of use, into the feeder line.
That sounds great. I mean, that sounds like just a intuitive adoption of operation science to lean shipbuilding. It's interesting when you talk about standardization because people say, "Oh, we're building a ship. It's just one ship. We're not making another one like it, and so we can't standardize." But to your point, if you're making 6,000 pipe spools, that's a production process, and getting people to understand that and apply that, and then understand obviously the science of the behavior of that system is key. We first met when I was at the Project Production Institute working on construction projects, and that's just a big insight for people that there is this science that governs their operations. You're not standardizing what you do every time. You're just standardizing how you do it, and you can get fantastic benefit out of that. It sounds like you did. So how did it go with the 6 different shipyards in terms of their adaptation of the lean shipbuilding model?
The results were incredible. They were really record setting. We reduced the shipbuilding cycle time. We applied it. The first shipbuilding program we applied this to back in the 2000s was on a mid-sized commercial offshore supply vessel shipbuilding program. And we produced, there were 4, I think it was 4 ship program. So quickly, we reduced the cycle time by 20%, and then by this one by 30%. We implemented lean ship design on a platform supply vessel that delivered. And this was unheard of, and I don't think it's ever been done again. But that delivered 100% of all the 600 or so engineering products on time, without any changes to the baseline schedule, and 0 rework.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Production always could rely on engineering to be late, so they could kind of slack a little bit, on the being ready, for sure. It's really the readiness or the lack of readiness. And there were implementations like reducing the number of unique parts, used on a ship line, from like 180 unique fasteners
Sure. Oh, yeah.
down to less than 10. I mean, why do you have to have 180, unique?
Reduced variation, less buffering required.
There were hundreds of those type of implementations. So
That sounds awesome. Yeah, a couple of things in listening to that from my experience in construction, which is what shipbuilding is there the detailed schedule seems to be there's a big misunderstanding about how well a detailed schedule will help you actually manage a project. And in terms of the way it manages a project, it doesn't really help you once you set up the project. What it does really help with, as you mentioned, you know where everything is and where it's supposed to go, and you set up the work breakdown structure so that you have all those relationships. And that's completely variable. But, as you said, that schedule is just as good until the first day of work, and then it's out of date. And so then you have to depend on the things that you described uh, to make sure that you get the kind of performance that you want, because a schedule is really just a reporting tool and it's a lagging indicator. It doesn't really describe the behavior you're looking for.
absolutely. Also, one of the I think looking back, at journey, with implementing lean and shipbuilding is while the impact to throughput and all that was wonderful, you know, what happened to the workforce, really that was a great lesson for me, right? Because we established production control rules, and the system provided the status. We had visual signals set up. We gave the deck plate the authority to stop the line, just like we did. We learned in Toyota.
Well, when you just for audience who's not familiar, a deck plate you mean is the construction area.
The deck plate workers. I mean, that's like the front line. That's just what we call the front line.
People who are welding things in place and assembling principal.
We changed the paradigm of there. There were really two types of workers, or two types of employees, and from a value perspective, we viewed the entire workforce as either production or production support. And so the accounting, part of production support, because production, it was the welders and the wrench turners was who was creating value, in this value chain. So once we kind of shifted that mindset and then gave the power to the workers to, if they had an issue, to stop the line. It was our job as management, or as a staff in a staff position to try to rush and fix the line. We implemented like a rapid escalation program, and we did some really fun things. I mean, we had I had this wild idea, because we people in the ivory tower they weren't going down to the shop floor to solve the problem. So I had police sirens.
Awesome.
Right? I mean, well, all through the shop, um, and I thought it was a great idea, right? Because it's loud. So we had them wired up one weekend, and I'll never forget. It was the Monday morning, bright and early, and I was out there, in the shop because I wanted to see this working. So I don't know. We started at probably around 6 a.m., and by, I don't know, 7 o'clock, a siren went off. Right? So we run over there. We're trying to take care of this problem, and all of a sudden, the second siren goes off, and I'm like, oh, so by, I don't know, 9 o'clock, seven of the eight sirens are going off in the shop. And if that was it, it's like, okay, this is, I was sticking to my guns though, right? This is, yeah, I had, people were coming out of the building to, help and see what's going on. What I didn't realize is we had the senior management team with a potential customer. They were walking the shipyard to show, wonderful our shipbuilding is. And anyway, so of course, they walk to the still shop and there's police sirens going off. So it's funny. And we ended up signing the contract to build the ship. So, it's
Well, at least they know you're not hiding your problems.
and I didn't get fired, so that's a good thing.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Well, that sounds like a learning experience, definitely. So, in your experience, then you've seen all this. Wait, before I want to, because I think you hit on the a really important topic once, and that's really a big motivation for the Operation Science Institute and the mission is this idea of once people understand the behavior of these systems that they're working in from the scientific standpoint where they can be predictable about it and take the kind of actions that you mentioned. It's not stick built. Everybody just gets a bunch of material and say, oh, how are we going to build this ship? But they put a methodology to it and they use a methodology that corresponds to the natural behavior of the system. One of the massive benefits, as you've seen, is it brings the stress level down for people, right? I mean, their jobs, people don't go home angry and kick the dog because everything's so screwed up at work. I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't ever happen, but it really changes it to a completely different level. And it's not because, somebody said, oh, you got to believe this is the best thing to do. It's because, you look at the science and like everybody agrees, like, oh, yeah, well, that's the way, for instance, the law of gravity works. And so we're going to work according to that. It's just a massive benefit. And I'm sure you saw that in your efforts.
The shipyards, I think I'm seeing more and more currently because of some issues in some of the very complex shipbuilding programs today that were everything's frenetic. I mean, everybody's just they don't have time to really think through the process. They don't have time to stop, because they're firefighting. They're moving from one fire to the other, and it takes a toll on the workforce. It takes a toll on the management team, and you see that. You can hear the just listen to the news and hear some of the some of the problems that the large shipbuilding programs are having.
Yeah, that takes a toll on people, definitely. And it seems like that. I don't know. So you started Lean Shipbuilding, and that was very successful. I mean, do people not adapt that, or do new people come along and they didn't know it?
Some shipyards you see signs of, I mean, they've continued down that path. I would say that, and they've brought in more automation that kind of that down that path and become more of a manufacturing. So yeah, there's some great pockets of that, but the industry as a whole, I w- I'm disappointed, but I'm always critical. I've got a critical eye, because that's when I go in the shipyard, I'm there to improve, and
Well, I'm biased, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. I just think that I wouldn't let like a site supervisor or yard supervisor, anybody on the deck plate or on the production floor or in operations if they didn't understand operation science. But that's a whole different topic because it really just helps you build all these techniques that you have with lean and be effective about it. And then you wouldn't have to worry about people, making it up as they go along.
yes, from a cultural perspective, I spent some time in some Japanese shipyards, and you know was their operational discipline um, was just awe inspiring. um, and I think that's as a whole and as a culture, operational discipline, unless you've designed that into your system, doesn't just happen in the U.S. shipyards, in U.S. organizations. So that's one of the root causes of I think when we have some great success and it doesn't, we don't always.
It doesn't propagate. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting too. I was talking, well, Mike McBride, he's on the board of advisors also, and on his, I'm not sure if he covered it in the podcast that he did, but in a conversation, he said, "Look, when the new guy comes in, he's hired to make a big splash. He can't do just what you've been doing before because, like, why do they hire you? Because you're supposed to have these new ideas." And so I'm being a little bit facetious because I know that doesn't happen everywhere and 100%, but there is a little bit of that, like we got to do something new, but the laws of operation science, the laws of gravity are the same, basically for all time. And so there is a little bit of that dynamic where you have somebody new come in, they feel like they have to do something new. And if they're not familiar with the basic science underlying operations, things can get a little cattywampus.
Absolutely. That's why, you know, your the online training that Operation Science has,
That's right. You got your certificate.
I've been recommending that to many of my clients for that very reason. Because if they once they understand, the principles and how life could be, it certainly would helps in having them implement and sustain, their improvement.
Definitely. So let's talk about one of the hot topics these days, artificial intelligence. In your recent NSRP proposal, you explored applying AI to naval architecture and engineering. So, what do you see as the potential for AI in ship design and production?
Yeah, I see an immediate need or a role, for AI in to streamline ship design. I think it would be a game changer, not just ship design, but in all of the other what I call production support functions. The naval architects, I mean, just think about it, they have to rationalize thousands of requirements to come up with a good design. Good, let's just take general arrangements, for the ship, which is general arrangements are like the floor plan, right, of a house. Uh, but but one that complies with requirements and optimizes, around the requirements. And AI can accomplish this in seconds. They can generate,
It's amazing.
to choose from. Um, the other area, and I've been using this with shipyards already, but is to check compliance of every drawing, as they're designing the ship.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah.
And so, and if there's an area of the design, like I said, within the flow of work that that they, if they put the refrigeration system too close to that to another, I don't know, to the ovens, I don't know, like in the gas,
Yeah, right. The boilers or whatever. Yeah.
they don't have the proper boundary, that's required. It can be in the 3D model and put it in place, and you can have AI, flag it right then and there and say,
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you're pretty because the other thing I was thinking about, so one of the things in my experience over 35 years is, and I figured this out, I don't know, midway through, like it's easy, well, relatively easy to build a new process and define the process. The real complexity and where people really get tripped up is change management, configuration management. And I could just see where AI would be perfect for that, like checking like, oh, this guy's looking at a drawing. Oh, it's the wrong ref, so don't look at that drawing. That could be huge.
having a way to just in real time have the new changes be part of that verification system, and where the requirement, the current and the right approved requirement is front and center. And that's what we use AI. I think of it as we refer to it as knowledge provisioning, but
I like the term. Yeah.
so that we can get the information, this millions of pieces of information to the right person at the right time in the flow of work as they need it, because they're overwhelmed with way too much information. And so I liken it to the GPS. So it's we kind of have a think of it as the ship designer or ship design GPS. That can account for changes like you account for like construction up ahead, right? So it can direct you, to down a different path. So a lot of exciting things, and I mean, shipyards do embrace, innovation and automation, and so we're hopeful we'll be um, going down this path a little more, in more detail in the next year.
Yeah, that sounds great. Lots of potential there. Again, from my operation science perspective, you still need to make sure that you are grounded in those concepts because you want to know when your AI is hallucinating or telling you useless information. No doubt it can be completely powerful for all the things that you just discussed. But I have seen situations where it can tell you the wrong thing. So you just have to be careful about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's change track a little bit here, and talk about Lisa Ellis. How did you get to where you are working in the shipyards and leading these massive construction projects? Where'd you grow up? Siblings? What were your what were your parents' interests?
So I grew up in a small town right outside of Lexington, Kentucky, and then we moved to South Georgia. So I'm a Southern girl. I have one brother and older brother. So I was smarter.
Well, we'll have to get him on the podcast and see what he says.
And my parents both worked civil service, so I grew up, understanding, what life was like in the government and the importance, the important role that both the military and civil service played, in this in our safety and security. And like most people raised in the South, it was we went to church on Sunday, played sports, had lots of friends, made good grades, ran home when the street lights.
Well, that's not like most people in the South. I'm not saying I made good grades to start with. It took me a little while to get that figured out. So it changes. So you ended up going to Georgia Tech though, right? What inspired you to do that?
Well, I knew I was gonna be somewhere in the math and science. I mean, I gravitated to that through school, but when I decided finally to be, that I really wanted to pursue engineering, I was in Georgia. So it's like, well, Georgia Tech, one of the best engineering schools in the country. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up there.
That's awesome. And then how did you get into shipbuilding, ship repair specifically as an industry?
So my first job right out of college was I worked for Florida Power and Light down in Miami, and that was interesting. That was also an industry where I mean, I worked in transmission and distribution, so designing and planning electrical systems, and um, that was when probably my first or second year. We were we were competing for the Deming Award, and if you if you remember, Florida Power was the first U.S. company to
Yes,
win the Deming Award. So,
I do remember that. Yeah.
just with my industrial engineering background, I was, doing my electrical planning but maybe the first half of every day, and then working with cable splicers and linemen on root cause analysis of of really dissecting, where the how to improve, so and quality circles and the whole Deming, thing. So that experience, and so I was a facilitator in our area of
Okay.
so that was, but anyway, so after spending I think maybe 8 or 9 years at Florida Power and Light, again it was I realized in that first job that I really enjoyed these challenging environments. And my mom was in Jacksonville, Florida, or in that area. So I decided I'd had a lot of fun, right out of school down in Miami and South Beach and all the fun stuff. But I thought it was time to kind of get back to my roots, and I got a job at a shipyard, and I really didn't know very much about ships. I mean, I've been on a cruise, I mean, I had to learn port, starboard, and stern, and bow, and, just that's kind of what, yeah. But as an engineer, you know, I got to working at it. I mean, it was great coming into. I mean, they didn't really know what to do with me. They knew they needed an industrial engineer, um, that really wasn't sure, what to do. So they just brought me in to be a coordinator on one of the ships, one of our ship repair projects. And I probably spent that first year like just shadowing all the workers, just learning, what it takes to actually repair a ship or what it takes to build a ship. So um, that experience, and I was 10 years at the shipyard before I went out on my own.
Okay. Very interesting. So, last question. If you go back in time and give your younger self one piece of professional advice, what would that be?
That's a tough one. Well, the obvious one is I would have to tell myself to buy this thing called Bitcoin. So that's the first thing.
That would have been really early on. Yeah.
So, I think what I would say is, and it's pretty simple, is just bring kindness and humor in all that you do, because it's a challenging, like, especially this industry is challenging environment. Temperaments sometimes run hot. Everybody's working, everybody's very passionate about what they do and are trying to move in the move forward in the right direction. But it's just bring kindness and humor, because
That's great advice for people today. Definitely. I love it. Well, listen, thanks so much for being on the podcast. It's great as always talking with you. Fascinating discussion about shipbuilding, ship repair. I think it's an industry a lot of people don't know too much about. Hopefully, they'll hear more about it in the coming years, because we need to get it going there.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure. I love talking about operation science as just in general, and certainly how it can help shipbuilding.
Sounds good, Lisa. Thanks, and we'll be talking soon.
All right. Thank you.
The Operation Science podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. Join the Operation Science Institute at opscience.org. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode. The views expressed by our guests are their own and do not represent their company's views unless specifically stated as such.